All righty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Roundabout Sports, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. It is Wednesday, November 15th, 2023. I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp, and we have a very special show for you this evening. The good doctor, Dr. Jeremy Housewright, will be joining us this evening to talk about his newest book that he has out called For the Love of the Show, Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories. We're going to get a couple pieces of wrestling news out of the way before we delve into having the good doctor on. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing a lot about his book, where you can purchase it, how he came about it. We got a lot in store. So, first piece of wrestling news I do want to say, first off, you can find Interstate 70 Sports Media as well as Roundabout Sports on Facebook and Twitter, as well as on our official I-70 Sports Media YouTube channel. But the first thing I want to say is Tony Khan has recently hinted at a fresh addition to the AEW roster. On social media, he revealed that AEW's finalized an agreement with a globally renowned wrestler, highly esteemed in the pro wrestling community and familiar to almost all AEW enthusiasts. Officially at the AEW Full Gear event is when this wrestler will sign, which is this Saturday, November 18th on pay-per-view. A lot of rumors are circulating on who they feel that it is or who it could possibly be. So leave in the comments below who you think. This personally, I think it's Will Ospreay, but we'll see what it is or who it is. We also have an interesting story about longtime referee Mike Chioda, who's interested in officiating a match between Roman Reigns and The Rock. Now, Roman Reigns versus The Rock has been a rumored match for 2 years now. It is being tabloid as one of the most hyped up what could be dream matches of all time, especially given the family relation between The Rock and Roman. And Kyoto expresses enthusiasm, saying, WWE, I would love to do a Roman Reigns and The Rock match. The Rock's probably employed somehow. That is box office, Hollywood. I mean, everything. And he said in regards for a match in AEW he would like to officiate, he said he would like to do one between Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega. Now, The Rock had confirmed that a match between him and Roman Reigns was considered for WrestleMania 39, but it did not materialize. So, with that, I do want to bring on a dear friend of mine. I've known him for. Also, I do want to thank Nick for tuning in. And good for the it's good for Nick Helsley, always tuning in, a great loyal fan. Yes, let's go St. Louis Ambush. The season's starting up soon. Be sure to stick with I-70 Sports Media for all the latest coverage with them. It's always a pleasure to be a part of with that organization. But as I was saying, yes, it is my pleasure to bring on the good doctor, JM. He has been a huge part of Interstate 70 Sports Media for the past year and a half, and he does so much great work with ReviewSTL.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the one, the only, the good doctor.
How's it going?
It's all right, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, man. Doing good.
Awesome. So, I guess the first thing I have to ask you is, first off, how long has it taken you to get this book fully realized and out and released?
Oh gosh, man, it's been a little bit. I'd say probably a year and a half.
Wow.
Um, I will tell you the idea first came about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I just never. Well, I'll tell you, the idea first came about 4 years ago when The Fiend debuted on WWE pay-per-view.
All right.
That's when I wrote an article for Review STL on Kyle Scarborough when he designed the mask. For those who don't know, he drew up the concept for Bray for the mask, and Tom Savini, the Hollywood special effects guy who's in movies like From Dusk Till Dawn, he's in a lot of horror films. He's the
Dawn
one.
of the Dead.
Yeah, he created the mask, and he got all the credit for it, really. But Kyle was the one who drew up the concept of the mask and the lantern that he carried into the ring that night at the pay-per-view. So I knew of Kyle. I had some tattoo work done at his shop, his then shop in Washington, Missouri. And I knew he was a wrestling fan, and I knew that Bray had some work done from him, and Braun Strowman went in there, Buddy Murphy. All those guys kind of rolled together and would go in there when they were in town and get work done by him. So I did the story on him, creating the mask. At that time, a book was never in my thoughts. But that was the start of it, I guess you could say. That article I put it out, and it sat for a couple years, and I guess I finally started toying with the idea of writing something probably back in 2021. I really got kind of the bug to do it. So that's kind of when it first kind of came around. I started officially writing it probably last year, so 2022. So yeah, about a year and a half it took me from start to completion.
And what was just the original inspiration for you wanting to write this book?
So I had been traveling to a lot of different wrestling shows. I had met a friend of mine, Dirty, who is actually very heavily involved with the XFL. He has his own talk show, the X Fan Show or whatever. And we would travel to WrestleManias together. And what's funny is, and I do talk about this in the book, he was a friend of my wife's for several years. And when I first got together with my wife, when we were dating, she took me over to his house, and I couldn't stand the guy. I absolutely did not like him. I don't think he cared for me much. We're polar opposites. He's very loud and brash. I'm very quiet and shy to a sense. So we did not hit it off. And in fact, I would tell my wife every time she'd want to take me over to their place, I didn't want to go because I couldn't stand him. And we became friends over wrestling. I found out he was a wrestling fan, and we would start watching all the pay-per-views together. And that turned into us traveling to different shows. We did our first WrestleMania together, WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans, and several more after that. And when we were at WrestleMania 33, I believe, it was in Orlando. It was me, him, and then another friend of ours who we took with us. We met this guy named Joey. And Joey came up to us out of the blue. We were at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And Joey walked up to us, and my buddy Chris was wearing a Cleveland Browns t-shirt. And he goes, "I've never met anyone who wore a Cleveland Browns t-shirt before." And I said, "Yeah, I don't,
That's true.
I can't help this guy's a Browns fan. There's something wrong with him." And then I realized the guy, when he was talking to us, had a strange accent. And I said, "Well, where the hell are you from?" And he said, "Well, I'm from Canada." And he's not from like Toronto or anywhere like that. He's from like way, way up in Canada. Actually in India.
So real French Canadian type.
Yeah.
Very heavy accent.
He's as Canadian as they come. And it turned out he had a hotel room directly next door to us, 20 miles away at this crappy Days Inn we were staying at. It was the weirdest thing. So we wound up chilling together all weekend. We never got rid of the guy till we left to come back home. And, he wound up coming here to the States and hanging out with us. I took him to a Chiefs game. He stayed with me for about 3 or 4 days. And, we've been friends ever since. And a couple years later, I was in Chicago at the original All In. And I met a couple guys that are from Los Angeles. And Eric and Ray. And then another guy, Eli, who's actually from Southern Illinois. But again, we hit it off. We wound up hanging out in New York at WrestleMania 35. And then I actually met up with Eric in Las Vegas for Double or Nothing a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So, I started thinking about the relationships that I had made with these people solely based off of wrestling. And I thought, if there's people like that out there, they probably have even more interesting stories to tell. So I just started asking around. I started, just putting stuff out on the internet at different message boards and groups and things like that. And I would slowly get some responses. Nothing that really kind of triggered me to want to write about it, The first person who I actually was serious about writing about, I believe, was Justin. Justin's in the book. He's an original St. Louis guy, but now he lives on the East Coast. Thinking he'd have to tell me. I think it's Connecticut or somewhere like that. I'm not exactly sure, but I saw something, and I don't even think he reached out to me. I think I reached out to him, but I saw something he had posted about getting the legit, real WWF wing title belt tattooed around his neck. And it took him 2.5 years to do. So I thought, that's a hell of a story.
That's dedication.
Yeah, that's dedication. I mean, that makes my little CM Punk tattoo on my arm look ridiculous.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, to get the full, original winged eagle belt,
and what's crazy, dude, is he actually called WWF and got the exact specs of the belt, so it was legit as can be. I mean, it is an exact replica. And he got it at Trader Bob's here in St. Louis.
Okay.
And I had tried reaching out to the artist, and the artist never got back to me because I really wanted to talk to the artist, but I don't know if he's not there anymore or what, but I could never get a hold of him. So he was the first person that I interviewed. And originally, after that story, I was thinking, man, I bet there's some wrestling fans with some really outlandish crap that they can talk about. So it was supposed to be kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of, just talking about like the crazy stuff that wrestling fans do. I always got a kick out of the guys that wear the belts to the events.
Yeah, that's always.
It was an inside joke that me and Dirty used to have. We started hollering out "Champ coming through" when we would see one of them. And at first, I guess it was meant to kind of be mocking them, but it turned into kind of a thing, and now it's kind of a prestigious honor to have us tell somebody that. I mean, we're down to the nitty gritty where if we see two guys walking, we're like, "Tag Champ's coming through," and if it's a little junior champ coming through, lightweight, heavy champ, stuff like that. So originally it started as I was going to write this book about, all the crazy shit that wrestling fans do. But the next person to reach out to me was John, and John is actually a ref for Game Changer Wrestling. And I had just kind of started watching Game Changer at the time, and I was like, I don't want to say I was appalled by it, but I was kind of shocked that they did some of the stuff that they did. The death matches were kind of new to me. I had heard of them, but I'd never really watched them.
It's like a thing of legend to you. It's like that because death matches, it's like the underground type thing.
Yeah.
And when you first
Yeah.
experience it, it's like,
so I'm thinking anyone that's involved with a death match has to be freaking crazy. When I talked to John, it was like the total opposite. The dude's like one of the kindest people in the world, and told me about his experience reffing these matches and how he got cut up really bad one time. Showed me some pictures of the stitches he had to take. Wound up, he actually met his wife in the ring, and they actually got married in a wrestling ring. So that was the second story I told. And then from there, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I'm like, I'm looking for positive stories. So I knew of Izzy Moreno through Busted Open. I listen to Busted Open almost daily. And years ago, she used to call in. And I was always amazed that this young girl, 8, 9, 10 years old, knew more than probably over half the wrestling fans that listened to that show. And she would call in and give her opinion and talk about, she was really heavily involved with NXT because I guess that's close to where she lives. And she was actually involved in a storyline with Sasha Banks and Bayley. She was kind of a Bayley fan. And there's actually in one of the NXT pay-per-views, Sasha goes over and rips Bayley's headband off her head, and she starts crying. And so from there, she kind of became like an internet sensation. And she always said she wanted to be a pro wrestler. And so I've been kind of following her progress the last 5 years. And fast forward now, she's 16 and getting ready to graduate high school. And she's a pro wrestler. She wrestles for Mission Pro, which is what's her name? The Hispanic wrestler in AEW, Thunder Rosa.
Oh yeah, Thunder Rosa.
Thunder Rosa,
one of my favorites.
She wrestles at Mission Pro, which is Thunder Rosa. I guess it's Thunder Rosa's organization. I'm not quite sure, but Thunder Rosa is heavily involved. And she trains in Texas, so she lives in Florida, but she'll actually go to Texas by herself like near San Antonio and train. And then she does matches occasionally. So her hope is to, when she turns 18, to get signed by WWE or AEW. And I think she's got a pretty legit chance at it. She's well known, and she's very serious about it. So I told her story. And then I talked to an indie wrestler named Kurt Gannon from Kansas City. And he was very close to making it with NWA. And he tore a muscle in his arm or something like that. So now he's kind of starting over from the bottom. I don't want to say bottom, but he's back on the indie scene. He hopes to get signed. So I told his story, just kind of a hardworking indie wrestler trying to make it, because I thought that was interesting as well. So he's another one that I talked about. And then I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm trying to remember everyone I've interviewed. There were 6 of them, so what's that, 3? Then I talked to, let me think here. Who else? As I mentioned, Kyle's story was the article that I had written. So I had planned on just taking that article, kind of updating it and throwing it in the book and being done with it, which is what I did. And then about 5-6 months ago, the news comes across that Bray had passed away.
Yeah.
And that changed things totally. I reached out to Kyle through text, and he had posted some things about his relationship with Bray. And I'm like, man, I have to have this stuff for the book. This is like so important. This is like a whole new avenue that the book's going to go down now because of what had happened. And he was gracious, man. He gave me text message links that he had sent with Bray. Actually, the night that Bray debuted The Fiend, he was at a Tool concert, and Bray had sent him a text saying they had just made history. So I put that in the book. I actually have the text link that I actually put in the book.
Oh, wow.
Some social media posts that he had posted after Bray passed, he allowed me to put in, and I have a picture of him and Bray together that I had put in the book as well. And then I was still looking, I was looking for that one story that really, really grabbed people's attention. And I had thought about ending it with Izzy, but I'm like, man, I just felt like there was something that I needed to do yet. I couldn't figure out who to talk to, but I'm like, there's got to be one more piece to this puzzle that I'm not getting. So I started thinking about it, and immediately Derek Baker came to my mind. And for those who don't know who Derek is, he's a 26-year-old guy who has Down syndrome here, and he lives here in St. Louis. He is an internet sensation. He's got 3+ million followers on social media, and they can follow him on Baker Banter. And he actually meets. He's just a huge wrestling fanatic, and he meets a lot of the wrestlers. He actually just got to meet Cena at the last WWE show here in town. But I had met Derek at the Royal Rumble here in St. Louis when I was kind of toying around with the idea. And I took a photo with them, and I look over, and there's a line of about 30 or 40 people just wanting to get their picture with this kid because he means that much to people. The positivity that he puts out there, that his family puts out there for Down syndrome and awareness of disabilities, is so cool. So I had to tell his story, and that was the hardest part for me, was telling that, because I wanted it to do justice to his story, and I wanted it to be very authentic. And I have a connection with Down syndrome. My uncle had it, and so I was around my uncle a lot when I was a little kid, so I'm very familiar with it. And so it was very hard for me to write that, and based on the fact that I didn't want to write it as I want people to feel sorry for this guy. I wanted to write it as him and his family are doing something positive. They're great role models. They're great ambassadors for the disabled community. And that's kind of the approach I took. And it took me a while to write. That's the longest section of the book, but it also took me the longest because I took the most time with it. So, I interweaved all those stories along with my stories and divided the chapters one by one. So you're not just hearing all of my story at one time. The first chapter is part of my story. Then I tell Justin's. Then I go into another part of mine. So I just skip back and forth throughout the whole book.
Okay. When it comes to going out, because there's so much, when you interview all these folks, careful time, intricate details have to be taken into account.
Absolutely.
And how based off the interviews you gave, how close to 100% accurate in detail? Like, is it a word for word? Any liberties taken? Like, how did you go about putting the words to the paper?
I recorded everything.
Okay.
I have the recordings still to this day. That's something as a journalist that I always prided myself on. I have oodles and oodles of files of audio throughout probably the last 20 years of conversations that I've had with musicians, with athletes, with presidents, that I just keep, because you never know when somebody may question your word. And it wasn't that I was worried about that at all. And that's the God's honest truth. I wasn't worried about any of these guys coming back and saying, I didn't say that. But I like to cover myself in the fact that I wanted it to be 100% true and 100% authentic. So
right.
Every time I talk to somebody through the phone, I have an app on my phone that I record with. Every time I met them face to face, I recorded it all. And anytime it was an email, or everything in the book was said to me. There was really no email besides Kyle's part, was text messages back and forth. Other than that, everything was from the mouth, and it's all been recorded. So yeah, it's 100% accurate.
Awesome. Did you ever have So, and this is your first book that you've written.
Yes, yes, it is.
For you, and I know that you recorded your interviews, but what was the biggest trial, tribulation that you went through while writing this book?
Um, the writing was easy.
Okay.
I had no problem writing it. It was and is the business aspect of it. If you've never written a book, you don't realize how much goes into creating a book. It's not just sitting down at a computer spewing out 100 pages or whatever, editing it, and then being done. There's so much more to it. The editing process was very tedious for me, again, because I wanted everything to be 100% correct and authentic. My biggest fear was that someone would open the book and find something misspelled or, bad punctuation. As a writer, that's something that I pride myself on being
Yeah.
100% authentic with. So I hired an editor, and because it's very hard to edit your own material, I'm sure you know that. Um, your brain's
Oh
not
yeah.
to see mistakes. And I let it sit for a while, and I went back and I'm like, man, I know I'm missing stuff. So I hired an editor. He took about a week and a half to edit the whole thing. And when I got it back, I thought, I'm going to look through it again. And he missed so much. I was really kind of pissed at him. Like he didn't even check the spelling of Pat McAfee's name because I talk about running into Pat. Actually, I ran into Pat and knocked him down in Las Vegas at a WWE show, and I talked about that in the book. And he never even checked on the spelling of his name, and it was wrong. And if that would have gotten printed, I would have felt like a total jackass.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
and there were just little things here and there that he missed that I'm like, any good editor should have gotten. So I went back through it twice, and I probably caught about 10 to 20 things that he missed. And they were all small. Normal person may not even catch them. Unless you know Pat McAfee's spelling of his name, you wouldn't notice it. But I knew,
Exactly.
I
And I would
knew.
know.
Um, so, and then the formatting of it was the thing that I really struggled with because I had never formatted a book in my life. I've created newspaper pages, magazine pages, using InDesign and so forth, but I had never formatted a book. So I got someone to format it for me, and they actually did a wonderful job. When they handed it back to me or sent it back to me, because the person who formatted it is actually from like India. When they formatted it and they got it back to me, I was blown away, man. That's when it became like, this is real. Like this is gonna happen now. Because it looked like a book.
Yeah.
The style of it, everything, it looked like a legit real book that I would pick up in the library, and that's when it became real. So I'd say that aspect of it was difficult for me, and trying to decide if I was going to do everything on my own or have a publisher do it. I met with a publisher, and I just didn't like the way they approached me. They immediately wanted to say everything that was wrong with Amazon, everything that was wrong with this company called Ingram Spark, who does a lot of books, and everything that was wrong with publishing through Barnes and Noble. Yet they sell their books to Barnes and Noble, um, and their price was like $3,000. And I'm like, the hell with that! I'm not paying $3,000 for something I can do myself. Um, so I decided to go out on my own and do it. Um, that's been difficult. Getting the word out is tough. I mean, I've called in favors to people that I've worked with for 20 years to get some press because I was going to hire a PR company. Um, I'm close to a couple people here in St. Louis that do PR for the Urge and El Monstero and things like that. And So I've really kind of picked their brain, and they've kind of helped me out, giving me some tips here and there. But I decided to do it all myself, and that's been the most difficult because I really want to see it do well, but it's a slow burn, and I am not the most patient person in the world, so that's been a little difficult.
I wanted to point out, so and I'm gonna address.
Mhm.
I have a picture here of what the front and the back looks like, and you know, first question I have, two questions in regards to the cover.
Yeah,
First, the title. Where do you get the "For the Love of the Show" title? What was that inspiration for that?
man, that title, I'll be honest, I pulled it out of my ass. I didn't. So I had a couple titles I was tossing around in my head, and I just kept saying, you know what? I'm not going to worry about the title till I'm done. That's going to be the last thing. Um, and I was sitting downstairs one night watching TV,
Mhm.
and I had a baseball game on, and I happened to look on my table, and I saw MLB The Show for my PlayStation 5, and I'm like, the show. And I'm like, well, wrestling is a show. I'm like, for the love of the show. And I'm like, that sounds really cool, but are people going to get it mixed up with thinking it's about baseball? Because you hear people call professional baseball the
The
show.
show,
We're going to make
right?
it for the show. Um, so then I'm like, well, for the love of the show, and I'm like, I need to be more specific. So that's how I added the second part. Pro wrestling fans tell their stories. Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, it just literally popped into my head, and I shot it off to a couple people that I was close to, and I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, because we had been talking titles. I'd been talking title, trying to think of a good title for a year, just kind of brainstorming. And I know one night, this is back when I was living in Kansas City last year, I had texted a buddy like 11 o'clock one night, and we had parent teacher conferences at the school, and I had nothing to do, so I was literally sitting there working on the book, and I'm like, I think I wrote down about 15 or 20 titles, kind of a play on words. A lot of it was similar to For the Love of the Show, like Welcome to the Show, or you know some stuff like that. And that title just stuck with me, honestly. So that's why I went with it. And I had thought about changing it a couple times, but every time I thought about changing it, it just stuck as the best idea.
And then the second, and look, you're coming from a guy that definitely knows a thing or two about when it comes to just titles and things. Like I've come up with just like big quotes and things like that, just taking a shower or just
Yeah,
playing a video game or something. So it's just funny how spontaneous things can come up,
it
you
really
know.
is. Yeah,
And sometimes it's just when your creative mind is free is when it works the hardest
yeah,
because you're not stressing out about certain things.
right.
So and I love the title. My second thing that I especially love is the cover art.
Ah, yes.
And I know I had talked to you a lot about it.
Hmm.
And you mentioned to us at I-70 about a lot of what it took for that, deciding the cover art, and just the whole process of that. So tell it for the viewers at home, like what was that all about? And for those that are tuning into our audio versions on Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, iTunes, it is a beautiful picture of a wrestling ring with spotlights, a sellout crowd. So go through that with us.
So I remember thinking about the cover, and again, I was still writing the book when I was thinking about the cover, um, because I know that's the first thing that people look at. That, let's face it, if a cover looks terrible, you're not going to read the book. That's just how it is. You
Right.
know? even as I'm a devout Stephen King fan, and if I get a book of his, the cover's not attractive, I'm not going to read it. So the cover was very important. The problem is I am not an artistic person. I cannot draw. I can't do any computer animations or anything like that. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to reach out. I'm gonna again have to pull the friend card here and pull a friend that has some art ability, or being a teacher for so long, I'm like, I know I got some students who can draw. So I started calling up some former students. Hey, would you want to do a cover for an actual book? And I can't pay you a whole lot, but I'll slip you a little cash, and it'd be a hell of a thing to put in a portfolio.
Right.
Route. So I originally was going to do that, and the cover only came about, I'd say, as probably, let's see, it's November. I probably came up with the cover concept late August, early September.
Oh, wow.
I was sitting at work and working on the book, and I think I was at the end of my day, and I'm just kind of surfing the internet looking at book covers for like wrestling wrestling books and stuff. And nothing appealed to me. Not anything.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, I'm like, well, I do take photos at, WWE events and AEW shows, and I have a ton of them because I've been shooting for 6 years now. So I'm like, maybe I'll look at them and find an inspiration of something I want. So originally, I'd planned on doing a wrestling ring, having someone draw a wrestling ring, and then putting the actual For the Love of the Show in the middle of the ring.
Ooh, that's actually a good concept. I actually like that.
I had talked to a person I knew about it, and she was like, yeah, I can do it. She was just, of course, when I told them I want a cover drawn, the first thing they asked me is, well, what do you have in mind? And I'm like, well, I have no damn clue. Just draw me some stuff and then we'll see if it sticks. Well, they didn't want to do it that way. So I kind of started thinking about it, and the wrestling ring always stayed in my head. And I happened to be going through photos, and that photo that's on there was taken at Royal Rumble here in St. Louis. And I saw the photo and I'm like, man, that's a perfect photo. So I put together a cover, and putting together the cover, man, only took me a half hour.
Okay.
It was quick. Now I went back and I tinkered with it here and there, especially with the font. But I made a cover on InDesign, and at first it was going to be color. And I'm like, man, I like the color, but I was also very leery of having the WWE logos on the turnbuckles. So I'm like, I really don't know. So I had a buddy kind of Photoshop it, and I didn't like it. And I'm like, well, what if I turn it black and white and then just kind of white out or black out the turnbuckles? Because I didn't know. I was worried, and I may have mentioned this to you guys. I'm like, well, if I put that photo on there, WWE might turn around and sue me. I didn't know if they could or not.
You had mentioned that you had come to me about that.
Yeah. And I did some investigating. And they're like, probably not, but you never know. So I went black and white, and that's actually Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. It's Roman Reigns on the floor, and Seth Rollins is diving onto him through the ring. You can kind of see it. That's one reason I turned it black and white, so you really couldn't see them all that well. But if you look close enough, you can see right in the center of the ring, you can see Seth Rollins diving onto Roman Reigns.
Wow.
So again, that's another reason I turned it black and white, because I didn't know if using their images would be an issue, So I kind of talked to some friends, and like, as long as you're not like, it's clearly evident that you're trying to profit off them, there's nothing wrong with it. And also when I turned it black and white, the lights just popped. The light, it's almost like lasers going through the crowd, and it just appealed to me. I'm like, that's it. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, that is the cover. And I kind of put a rough draft of it together, and I sent it to a couple people, and they're like, yeah, man, that looks sweet. So that's kind of how the cover came to be.
I mean, I love to see it, and it turned out really well. You know, for especially for the process it took to get it there.
Yeah.
You know, the end result. I think the end result of everything was what you had wanted and more.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm correct.
I think so. I mean, I would have liked to. I mean, have you had a chance to see the book or to look at it yet?
I've seen snippets of it. I do plan on getting mine off of probably Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Yeah, 22nd it drops on Barnes and Noble. So,
So,
but I had wanted it to be a little bit longer. Being a writer and being someone who reads a lot, I like long books. No, I wasn't saying I wanted it to be like 300 pages or anything, but I was envisioning originally about 130 to 150 pages.
and what are we at with the book?
Depending on where it's printed from, right around 100 to 103.
Okay.
So, and it changed because when I typed it all out in the Word doc, it was 132. But then once it got formatted and all that shrunk everything down. So when I originally finished it, the manuscript was where I wanted it to be. Now I had a couple other stories that I really wanted to add to it, but the one gentleman didn't get back with me in time. And then the other guy is actually from New York, and he's a teacher. And he started a pro wrestling club at his school where the kids actually get together after school and watch wrestling and study wrestling matches. And they've had like Swerve Strickland stop by there, Sasha Banks.
Oh my goodness.
These are middle school kids. And you can look him up. There's WWE's done stuff about him as well. And I really wanted to tell his story, and I reached out to him, and the school would not let him do an interview without approving. So I went through their steps. I wrote an official letter to them, sent it to them via email. They never responded. And I said, I'll give you 2 weeks to respond. I never got a word from them. So I went ahead and forged ahead without it.
Right.
So, and there were other people who had contacted me and yeah, I got this great story I'm going to tell you. And then they never followed through. So, there were thoughts of adding more to it, but once I got the editing done, I really didn't want to add any more to it because I'm like, well, I'm going to have to go through and edit it all over again. And I wanted to avoid that.
As an author, especially for the type of book that you've written, it always will leave a lot left to be desired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which begs the question, do you feel that, I mean, I guess pending on the sales success of, I know your book's already on Amazon, and you just mentioned that on the 22nd of November, it drops at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
Do you feel that if the sales are a success, and if you're personally happy with how things turn out, would you consider a sequel book?
That's a good question. I've been asked if I'm going to write another one, and right now, I have some ideas. It won't be, if I write another book, it's not going to be a sequel per se. And I most likely will write another one. I have some ideas. I grew up in Columbia, Illinois, for anyone who knows where that is. One of our rivals is Waterloo, Illinois.
Yeah.
And they call it the Route 3 rivalry. And it's a very storied rivalry for basketball and football. And I've really kind of started tossing around the idea of getting all these coaches and players together and having them tell their stories and kind of chronicling the Route 3 rivalry over the last 40 years. I don't know if I'll do it because I had a friend tell me, well, you're really shrinking down your targeted audience then. Anyone outside of Illinois probably won't give a damn, which is true. I mean, I could understand that. Although I've read plenty of sports books. I have a great sports book I read about a girls basketball team in Alaska that won the state title a few years back. It's a great book, and
I think if the story's good and you place it well, market it well enough to where there is a great message behind it, to me, I don't think it would matter who it's about. I think people would, gravitate towards it regardless.
Yeah, so that's an idea. I've also thought about writing a memoir about being in education for so long, the things that I've seen and experienced. But with that, again, there's probably some stories that are better left untold, to avoid my embarrassment or the school district's embarrassment. So the ideas are kind of there. I most likely will do another one at some point. Will it be about wrestling? I don't know. I mean, there is one wrestling story I would love to tell if I'm allowed to do it. And that's Herb Simmons' story. I've talked to Herb.
Herb's a great guy. I've had the pleasure, known him a long time.
He's kind of talking to people about writing his story, and I'm one of them he's mentioned it to. I would love to do it. That would be a major undertaking. 50 years in this business, you're talking a long, long book. I probably reach out to Herb once a week, talking to him about his new fan fest, which I'm going to be there actually selling my book that weekend.
All right. Well, I look forward to being. I know I'm going to be there again.
And I'd also like to talk to Kevin Von Erich about the new movie coming out, and I've also reached out to Chavo Guerrero because he was heavily involved in the Iron Claw training the actors. So there's different things that I have in my mind. But, right now I'm focused on promoting this, letting it sit for a while, and just seeing how it does. I mean, listen, if I don't sell a whole lot of them, am I going to be disappointed? Maybe a little bit. But I'll tell you this, the people who have read it so far have nothing but positive to say. And that's what means the most. If I would have wrote this and the first couple people to read it would say, "Oh, it's a piece of shit, it sucks," then I would have been down. But
right.
I kind of challenged myself to do. People have told me for years, ever since I was in college, that I needed to write a book. And a big part of this book is reflecting back on the relationship myself and my grandfather had together. My grandfather passed about 5 years ago. He was a father figure he was kind of like my father. We did everything together. We attended. I mean, he's the reason I'm a Chiefs fan. He's the reason that I was a sports fan. Really, he took me all to the sporting events, and I talk about that in the book. Us going to wrestling matches together over at the Kiel Opera House and the Checker Dome, and just sitting there. And we'd never sit close. We'd always sit up top, and we would just sit there and laugh like hell. And so for me, when he passed, it was tough it's been tough for me to get over. So I think part of this book was kind of a cathartic experience in a way, a way of me letting all that out and
right.
Just talking about it, because again, I'm not a talker. I am very quiet naturally. I don't like to say much, and writing was always my way of getting things across, getting my feelings across. I was laughing the other night. I was giving an interview and I was telling the guy, I said, I was that kid that if I wanted to ask a girl out, I'd write her the note and hand it to her.
Yeah.
Because I was scared shitless to go talk to her. I've always been a writer. And people have always told me, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And so, I think it shocked everybody that it was about wrestling. I really do. I think they thought it would be about my grandfather. I think they thought it would be about something with like football or the Chiefs. So I think it even my mom, I think, was shocked when I told her it was about wrestling. She was kind of like, "Oh, it's about wrestling," because with some people, wrestling still has that stigmatism to it that it's kind of for hillbillies, and and it's not. There's so many people from all walks of life that love pro wrestling. And
Exactly.
another reason that I chose to write this book is you don't have to be a wrestling fan to like this book. I think anyone who wants to read positive stories that will motivate you to go for your goals and to try to achieve what you want to achieve, this is a good book to read, because you really hear some stories that some of these individuals could have given up on their dream. They could have just went about life and not attempted to achieve their goals, and they've done that, or they're doing that. So part of the book is me kind of applauding them for doing that. And I think that's why I wrote it. That was me going for my goal to write a book. I've written everything else. I've written a 100-page dissertation for my doctorate. Why not write a book? So
Right.
yeah, I think that it was a little bit of that for me, and I was doing that for the individuals who I interviewed.
Well, and that's great. The last question I have for you, and I wanted to end it on definitely because this has been fantastic, and I love
Well, I
the
appreciate it,
heart.
man.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I love the heart you've put into the book. I love the heart of others that you've put into the book, because it is genuine. The thing of it is, I've always had an interest in nonfiction. Whether it be biographies, autobiographies,
Right.
just hearing stories from other people's perspectives. Those are the
Same.
types of things I've always found the most interesting.
Yes.
Now, for the casual reader that well, actually, I got two final questions. So the first one is, to the casual reader, what would be the best pull-in quote or best thing you would say to them about wanting to read this book?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I would tell a casual reader, pick it up, read it, read the first 10 pages. If you don't see yourself in the first 10 pages, then put it down. It's not for you. If you're the type of person who has never been motivated to try to achieve a goal, if you've never struggled to try to achieve something, this book isn't for you. Which I think wipes out most of the book should be for most everyone, I think, because I mean, who hasn't struggled to achieve something, whether it be as simple as trying to quit smoking. This book, I think, will motivate you. It'll make you see that, man, this kid's got a disability, yet he perseveres and he continues to succeed. He is famous all over the United States and even out of the United States because he just has a love for life. Or, this guy was injured badly, but he continues to try to achieve his goal. It's just the stories will make people feel good, and that's the point of it. It is about pro wrestling, but there's a lot of life lessons that can be learned from the book other than pro wrestling. And the one thing that I really tried to do, and once you read it, you'll understand. I broke it down, and you're involved in wrestling, so you know
Oh
the
yeah.
lingo and the terms that are used. Normal everyday people don't know what the hell we're talking about when we talk about heels.
No, they wonder what we're talking about, like heels, faces,
Yeah,
kayfabe,
I
things
break
like
all that
that.
down early on in the book. Like within the first 10 pages, that's broken down so people know what I'm talking about, because I looked at it from somebody may pick up this book who's never watched a second of wrestling in their lives. How am I going to keep them invested? So
Right.
you got to break it down to where and that's where the teacher in me came out. You got to break it down to the simplest form possible so they can understand it.
Okay, I love it. And then lastly, I want to ask, for anybody out there, what is the best advice you'd give anybody out there that wants to write a book for the first time, a first-time author? What would be the best advice you could give them?
Just go for it. Don't listen to people telling you your idea is stupid. Just do what you want to do. Make sure that you have everything lined up. Don't go into it and just start writing. Have an outline, have an idea of where you're going. Otherwise, because I think that was my biggest problem. I had other projects that I had worked on in the past that were fiction, but they were loosely based on true events that had happened to me. And that was the problem. I would just start writing, and 12, 15 pages in, I was like, where in the hell am I? It was like I took a one-way road and didn't look at any of the road signs, and I was lost.
Yeah.
So my advice would be know where you want to go and just do it. Be damned anyone who tells you it's a dumb idea, because you're doing it for yourself. Obviously you want people to read it and you want people to enjoy it, but finishing a book is almost like a marathon. You have to do it for yourself. You have to reach within yourself to finish it, because there were times when I was getting close and I'm like, man, I don't know if I can finish it this way. I don't know if I'm going to leave it this way. And I would start questioning myself. You just got to do it, finish it, let it sit for a little bit, go back and reread it. And then if you want to add anything to it, then you do that. So it's all about just, perseverance and gutting it out, and not listening to what people tell you, because that's one thing that I've learned. I've talked to people who have written books on the oddest things, man, like magic cards. I met some guys that wrote a book about magic cards. They wrote it together, and they were the most psyched people about their book. And I'm thinking, I would never pick up this damn thing. I'd use it as a coffee table
Coaster or something.
for a glass of beer. But dude, the passion that they had for it was unreal. And everyone I talked to, they said that's what they can see with this, is the passion that I evoked for it. Now that it's done, I'm proud of it, and I want people to read it. I don't care if it sells a lot, but if people read it, that's what I want, because it's a great story. And it's really for all ages too. That's the one thing I was talking to some of my students about, because I was reading them some excerpts of it, and there are a couple curse words here and there. Like I tell a story about MJF. Me and a buddy had run into MJF in Chicago, and at the time I didn't know who he was. This was before AEW. This was at the
Oh, okay.
I didn't know who MJF was. He walks past us, and my buddy goes, "Hey, MJF." MJF turns around and goes, "Go fuck yourself." And I'm like, well, now that we know who MJF is, it makes sense.
It makes sense, though. Yeah.
Back then, I'm like, really? This nobody's going to tell us that? Like, screw this guy. And then once I saw him in the ring and saw his whole character, I got it. So, but other than that, it's a clean book. I'm going to let my librarian at my school have a couple copies so students can read it at the high school. But I think any kid who likes wrestling, it's safe for them to read. And that was a goal of mine. I didn't want to, censor anything, but at the same time, I didn't want it to be filled with curse words and, anything sexual. I wanted it to be able to be marketed to all ages, and that was very important to me. Being an educator, it's a book that I think if you need to motivate your kids, you could read a chapter of it to them, honestly, and I think it would get across the point that a teacher would be trying to make. So that's kind of the route I took with it as well. I wanted it to be for all ages.
Well, I love to hear that. JM, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. And folks, you can go on Amazon right now for the love of the show. For those watching the audio or the audio version of the show, I have a picture of what the front cover and the back cover looks like. You can find For the Love of Your Show, Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories by Dr. Jeremy Housewright. You can find it on Amazon, and then starting on November 22nd, you can find it on Barnes & Noble or at Barnes & Noble. So,
and I'll have copies myself. I actually got a shipment coming in tomorrow and then a shipment coming in right after Thanksgiving. So if anyone knows me and they just don't want to, some people don't like to order stuff online. I get it. Hit me up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or email me or, whatever. Or they can hit you up and you can get in touch with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can meet up with them and make sure they can get a copy.
All right. Well, that sounds like a plan, Jam. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm looking forward to reading the book.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Take care, dude.
Yep. You too. Thanks.
All right, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the good doctor, Dr. J.M. Housewright, here on Roundabout Sports. With that, we are going to wrap up this evening. As always, I put up the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI. That's 1-800-950-NAMI. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for those who struggle. As always, also, we close by putting up the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and for that, you dial 988. The line is open 24/7, 365, 366, only beers. Understand you're never alone in this world. There is always somebody out there who loves and cares about you, and they're only wanting you to get the help that you may need. You are just a phone call or text message away. You could also be the listening ears for somebody else who struggles as well. I want to thank the good doctor for being on this evening, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in this week, November 15th, 2023 on Roundabout Sports. I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp, and remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading. Good night, everyone.